Schauspieler sind ja eigentlich meine geringste Sorge bei dieser Serie. Problem ist, die ist so ultra schlecht strukturiert und geschrieben und es ist so viel Quatsch drin, der nicht in den Büchern drin steht. Es sind einfach Sachen dabei, die auch einfach keinen Sinn ergeben. Das ist das Allerschlimmste an dieser Serie. Wenn es wenigstens alles perfectly fine wäre. Aber das ist es irgendwie nicht und das ist natürlich mal schade. Oh Mann, jetzt muss ich vor allem erstmal auf Englisch umswitchen hier. Also, haben wir den Trailer jetzt hier stehen? Nein, wir nicht? Okay, Glück gehabt. Ein Glück, ey. Die lassen sich hier Zeit. Oh Gott, ey. Ich hab so keinen Bock, ey. Ich werde einmal den Chat ausblenden, damit wir hier gleich die volle Aufmerksamkeitsdichte haben. Ich habe mir schon mal meine Bücher hier alle hingeholt. Wir haben zum einen Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, dann natürlich eine der wichtigsten Quellen, also ich würde sagen, das sind so die wichtigsten Quellen für das Zweite, aber das ist ja der Ringe halt. Ist aber sehr unhandlich, deswegen werden wir damit nichts machen. Und für Notfall haben wir natürlich noch den Atlas von Mittelerde am Start von Frau Karen Wynne Fonstead. Der ist auch ziemlich gut. Herr der Ringe, wenn ich was in Herr der Ringe gucken wollen müsste später, dann würde ich das in der Digitalversion tun. Rich könnte ich hier nochmal. Was für Gelöt gibt. Wir haben jetzt Ringe der Macht Gelöt gleich. Season 3, Trailer, Teaser, was auch immer sie da zeigen. Wir warten noch drauf, dass das auf YouTube hochgeladen wird. Da muss ich irgendwie eine Live-Reaction zu dem Gelöt. Überleg, ob ich jetzt auch einmal hier den Stream auf dem anderen Twitch-Kanal anmache. Wird man einfach mal machen. Haben wir mal wieder Content auf anderen Kanälen. Ich werde auch noch einen Livestream auf dem Hauptkanal machen, gleich, aber ich würde erstmal so eine Live-Reaction vielleicht aufnehmen. Und mal kurz gucken, was ich von dem ganzen Gelöt halte. Hello everybody, welcome. Now we switch to English here for the moment being. And yeah, currently waiting for the release of the trailer for Rings of Power and stuff. I'm not 100% sure where I put the other Twitch chat. Maybe something like that. Okay. I have to refresh, right? It's not there yet. I might switch to German. It's from the panel, yeah, we could maybe do that. I'm not sure how much, like, my biggest worry is a bit that we might not find the thing we want to find. You know what I mean? Like it's discouraging to watch, maybe. I'm not sure. My confidence in the series is definitely diminished. We already talked a lot about this. And usually it's very annoying to deal with a lot of things surrounding this series. Kind of strange that it's still not online. We had the trailer for Blade Runner, we all watched that. Looks kind of nice. Let me see if something's happening on Reddit or so. I would assume it would be posted here if it appears as well pretty fast. Maybe after the panel, that is true. We have a live blog here that kind of tells us what's going on as well. Okay, I'm not sure what I have to press here. Durin's brother is called Thrain. I'm pretty curious how they would pronounce the name. Durin are finally teenagers. Okay. Wir können übrigens weiter Englisch schreiben im Dingensen-Chat. Macht, wie er das meint, aber now we wait here. I'm already kind of tired and exhausted, but we will see. I would love to make a thumbnail or something. The problem is, I think we have to see how this works. Because I don't have any footage yet. At least like to have a screenshot. But yeah, the plan is kind of recording my first impressions of Rings of Power and then seeing what we do from here. I'm not really good at this expression stuff, I think, but we will see. I could, but there might be a more interesting scene in the trailer. Question: is Amazon yet in our time? No, they're not. I only upload the trailers in 1080p. I kind of like it because it's easier for me to technically to download it. But yeah, we will see. Question is, does the blog update automatically? I have the feeling that here my browser is not well supported. Okay, I just read Simon Pegg will voice a Balrog. What on earth? The Nazgul appeared on stage. I mean, technically, the Nazgul can speak. The Balrogs can speak. The question is, which language would they speak? Okay, the block made a sound. Okay. It gets the entries getting wild. Oh god. Just reading the blog entries of what's happening currently in the panel. I always think, oh god. No man. Breakdancing thing kind of distracts me, I have to admit. Let's put it that way. With every message with every blog entry I read here on this page, my my appreciation or my I don't know what it's called of watching the trailer is kind of diminished. What is a BTS creature feature? Is BTS the Korean pop band, or am I missing something? Anticipation. Yeah, my anticipation of what might to come is diminished. Behind the scenes, okay, I just thought it's a Korean pop band. Fell Beasts, Balrog, Mumakil. Trailer is shown again to close the panel, and that's it. Okay, we have maybe a few minutes, hours, maybe 10 minutes. I don't know when it. Jack said on chat that it was be posted 2030 or something, so from my perspective at least, so I have 12 minutes or so. I hate everything. Shit. I need a yellow thing to mark it. I haven't used the yellow stuff in ages, chat. The age of men is over. The age of men is what? Over? Now, you know, my thumbnails have this little thingy at the side. Well, it's, I guess, on this side. I don't know. Yeah, it's on this side from your screen. And yellow means Rings of Power, and red means it's a live stream. I don't know. Other stuff means gaming content. That kind of thing. How big is the excitement? I would say below average. Oh god, I'm not ready, to be honest. I'm completely not ready. In a way, yeah, it's kind of cool that a new show comes. On the other way, it's, oh god. First impressions. Wait. We have Lord of the Rings new stuff. Warhorse Studios news. The Warhorse Studio, the last announcement we got? Probably. We're currently working on the thumbnail already. Still not there. Lucky me. The question I have to ask myself, do I feel lucky? Punk. I still find it funny that you review prediction fun facts for beginners, first impressions. No announcements, maybe? New ordner. SDCC teaser trailer season 3. 2026. Rings of Power SDCC trailer season 3. Oh god. Rings of Power season 3. First impressions. Speichern mal. Jetzt halt ein Ohrwurm von dem einen Lied. Schlecht. Summary season 1 I did once. Oh god. I also definitely what's my last Rings of Power video on the main channel, chat? That's a question to be asked. Nein. Episode, yeah, the pros and cons season 2. I found it then. We have a thumbnail here. Geh mal mit der Farbe hier, Chat. Sollte ich einfach das Ding öffnen und die Farbe kopieren, oder? Kann ich nicht ganze. Mache ein Copy. If it works. Okay. That I got already.
Cringe.
Teaser. What was cringed? I'm currently working on my thumbnail stuff. Just in case we need that, I guess we will need it. Was habe ich denn schon wieder gemacht? What did I do? It's not there yet. We have maybe... Okay, if Jack is right, we have 2 minutes left. Any last words, chat? Anything you want to say? Anything you noticed that we should discuss before we go into this? I can only say, don't hate the player, hate the game, or something like that. It's not my fault. I'm not looking too much forward to it. Did you play Marvel Rivals about? Then I know why. I could at least understand your reaction there. Rings of Power. Ask myself. Already schedule the next stream. Is it there? Okay. Now. Just was still working on my thumbnail. Oh, I'm a bit sad. Oh god. It's 1 minute and 50. Okay, chat. Here becomes here starts the recording stuff. Just as a warning, I mute all the channel sounds you have. If you have channel points, don't spend them now. F11 maybe? Maybe a stupid idea. Resolution is 1080p. They're still not at 4K. It's fascinating. Okay, chat. I click on record. We record this here live as 1080p video, whatever. On the other channel, I just got a by AI viewers response. Cool. Perfect timing. But no, thank you. Okay. It didn't start. I'm just thinking about what to say as the beginning. Because we have to do a full live production and I don't want to do anything afterwards. So everything has to be careful, thought out. Let's drink something. Let's take a Belgian. No, that's not needed, but just have to think what I say. Hello everyone, welcome to this little recording. The trailer or teaser for Rings of Power Season 3 just came out, and this is basically the first time of me seeing it, a reaction and so on. I think we watched it one time, and then maybe go through some stuff I noticed afterwards. I also, in the meantime, tried to hack my Lord of the Rings copy and hope it won't hurt too much. My anticipation of the show is a bit diminished, to say the least, but yeah, I don't know. We will see how it will go. And let's start. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, but we have to do it. Sorry for all the people who hate watching stuff about Rings of Power, but well, I'm curious, and a lot of people are. So let's start with it. Play it with sound. Maybe shut up, and if it gets claimed, this part of the trailer will just be silent or something afterwards. I don't know how it will work. You will find out when you watch this live.
Now is the mighty hour come.
The Dark Lord is on the brink of crafting a new power. One ring to rule them all. He's got armies scouring Middle-earth.
Middle-earth will burn. Has it not yet occurred to you? Death might well be the price of saving it. Trying to get back to you. There are no friends of Mordor here.
Come with me.
The Dark Lord. We have to stop him.
The shadow rises in Middle-earth. How would you like to rise with it?
Stop. I think that's it. Well, will you wear better wigs? Well, we will see about that. So, few things noticeable, I guess. It was to be expected that the one ring is, I guess, the only ring missing in the creation, even though the order of creating the rings is wrong in the books. It would be lesser rings, 16 rings of power, which are the 7 and the 9, then the 3 rings of power, and then kind of in parallel to the creation of the 3 rings of power, but it finished a bit later, the 1 ring. And then Eregion is attacked by Sauron. That's how it works in the books. In the series, it's completely different, and it makes very little sense in my opinion, because it kind of destroys the whole point of the ring, but the 1 ring. Whatever, we will see. Let's not discuss old stuff here. So let me just mute the sound for you. I leave it on for me. That makes it a bit easier, I think. So I can maybe see off the voice stuff. I'm not sure, because sound on YouTube is always difficult, often gets claimed. But whatever. So we have, first thing noticeable here, we have of course Mordor. Sauron is doing stuff. You could argue this here might be his fortress being built. I would assume we have Mount Doom in the background, of course. So this might be Barad-dûr. Not sure if this is a final stage or if it's still built. From the book perspective, when the 1 ring is created, Barad-dûr should be already done, I think. I have to maybe I should have to look here in our good old friend, the Appendix B, to find this out exactly, because I'm not sure when he starts. I think there's actually a note in Appendix B regarding, which has a timeline of everything that happens. The second age, 1200, I think it is. Sauron endeavors to seduce the Eldar. Gil-galad refuses to treat with him, but the smiths of Eregion are won over. The Númenóreans begin to take permanent havens. I could swear, no, it was 1000, there it is. He begins the building of Barad-dûr. He completes the building of Barad-dûr in 1600, when the ring is also created. As far as I remember, the foundations of Barad-dûr are bound to the 1 ring anyway, so it kind of makes sense that it is completed. So seeing Barad-dûr not fully finished here kind of makes sense in the perspective that it happens around the time the 1 ring is created. So fitting to season 3, I guess. It makes little sense in the regard that we are post destroying Eregion getting at least some of the rings back, but yeah, that's, I guess, a story we have to kind of deal with. So yeah, little bit of ring forging here in this context. We kind of, well, we potentially have to look into it, but I assume it's what is written on the ring, and here in the middle it will be cast. We see Galadriel dancing with, I assume, we learn it here later, that it's Celeborn. Wrong season. And we see a proto-Nazgul, as they are called. There was an article on Empire that already talks a little bit about all of this. That they want to show what they call, I think they call it a Nazgnagol or something like this. Because the Nazgul translated ring race, and they're not race yet. They are still human, it seems. They wear the rings of power. It's a bit difficult, in my opinion, to fully grasp the idea, and I guess we have to wait for how it plays out here in the season 3, because it was kind of clear when they make a show about the Second Age and the creating of the rings that the creation of the Nazgul will be also a topic in this. In the timeline, the 1 ring is forged 1600 roundabout. in the Second Age, and I think the first appearance of the Nazgul is 2251, so quite a bit later. The timeline is compressed a lot, as you can see here. And what is interesting in this regard is a quote from the Silmarillion. I'm not sure how it looks when it comes to the right situation there, but it's always interesting to read it. My little copy of it. I'm not sure if I will find it. It's in the section called of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. And some pages in, we can kind of read that men are easier. Yeah, it is page 346 in this version. Now, men proved easier to ensnare. Those who used the 9 rings became mighty in their day. Kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old. They obtained glory and great wealth, yet it turned to their undoing. They had, as it seemed, unending life, yet life became unendurable to them. They could walk, if they would, unseen by all eyes in this world beneath the sun, and they could see things in worlds invisible to mortal men. But too often they beheld only the phantoms and delusions of Sauron. And now comes a very important point. One by one, sooner or later, according to their native strengths and to the good or evil of their wills in the beginning, they fell under the thraldom of the ring that they bore and under the domination of the one, which was Sauron's. That's kind of the description written by Tolkien, or maybe edited by Christopher Tolkien then, and published in the published Silmarillion. And what is interesting here is the notion that Tolkien talks about the good or evil in their will. So it is possible, and I think that is, in my opinion, a very important point about the corruption through the rings, is that it is a very slow process. Potentially, I would assume Sauron planned it as such, that it is a very slow process. And it also indicates that there might have been some goodwill among the Nazgul, but also there might be some evil among them, or a mixture of both. Who knows? But they were given to men. We only know from one note that it's speculated that 3 of them were Numenorians, and we know that from this other book that we have here, Unfinished Tales, there is a Nazgul called, one of the Nazgul is called Kamul in one version, the Shadow of the East. And then there's also another version where it's not called Kamul anymore, but a Nazgul called the Black Easterling. Though this Nazgul does basically the same as Kamul, so people assume that both are the same and that Kamul is an Easterling. That is pretty much the only information we have about them. Everything else is kind of a mystery. There's some other debate you could, for example, make. We had the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War games, and there in the DLC we had also fan fiction, basically made up stories who the Nazgul once were, and in the DLC we had 2 female Nazgul. That is kind of interesting, because in the Ringverse that we find in Lord of the Rings, there is an interesting detail, if you think about it. Lord of the Rings, in the chapter Shadow of the Past, it should be, if I find it here very quick, it's hard to tell, but it has what is written on the rings. And the question is if I find it so fast, potentially not. But in this chapter, Shadow of the Past, there is the Ringverse also in it. Here it is on page 50 on the 50th anniversary, kind of fitting in the 50th anniversary setting. And that the first line is 3 rings for the elven kings under the sky. Tolkien made different versions or iterations of this poem as well. There were also versions where it was 9 rings to the elves, but he at the end he decided for 3. And what's interesting is 3 rings for the elven kings. Interestingly, one of the 3 elves getting one of those 3 rings was Galadriel. She's not a queen, not a king. So you could say that the lines here are poetic, and you can't take them completely face value what is written there. Also, Círdan got one of the rings, in some versions, or I think Gelöt was the only of those 3 who got rings who was a king. Círdan was not a king. He later got the ring. Technically, in one version, Gelöt gets 2 rings and gives one to Círdan and his later to Elrond, but that's a different story. However, Galadriel got the ring first hand, and she is not an elven king and not an elven queen. She is a high noble, and she's from a line of kings, but she's definitely not considered a king or a queen in this regard. So you could make an argument that there might be female Nazgul, and I think the show might show something like this. I don't have necessarily a problem with it, because you can kind of stretch what 9 to mortal men doomed to die might mean. However, it's what we have to kind of understand is that what they show here is fanfiction. Like, Tolkien never told us anything. We know there is the Witch King of Angmar. Angmar is a name that is a realm the Witch King later took in the Third Age, so it's not nothing that should appear here in the Second Age. There he's potentially just called the Witch King, which indicates that he has kind of to do with sorcery in some shape or form. If this happened during his time as a Nazgul, as a servant of Sauron, or if this happened at the time when he was still doing his own thing, we don't know. Never really stated. If he was one of the Númenóreans, we don't know. It's really hard to tell. It's really difficult to tell, I think. And we can only speculate about it. The show has to, I assume, come up with at least some ideas or speculations about these Nazgul and who they are, which I'm perfectly fine with. One thing that I might criticize here, if we come back to what I just read here in the Silmarillion, with one by one, depending on their wills, if they were good or evil, they fell under the thraldom of the ring. That is, in my opinion, a very important point, which makes the One Ring and the plan of Sauron in the book so brutal. They might not have seen what is coming to them. Sauron showed up, maybe gave them the ring. I would assume Sauron would give the ring to people who are already in a certain position. He would not give it to total nobodies that he finds somewhere at a farm or something. It would be strange. Maybe if he sees a potential in somebody becoming a powerful servant anyway, okay. But I would assume usually he goes for people that already he has a benefit getting them on their side. And he gives them the ring and says, here, I give you this ring. And he basically does the same thing he did with the elves before. Maybe in a disguise and saying, hey, I'm a good guy. I'm definitely not Sauron. Who knows? We don't know if Sauron revealed himself. But what Sauron, what the rings do, and what is important in this context, at this point, when Sauron gave those 9 rings, the One Ring already existed. All the rings were created in Eregion. The 3 rings were created in Eregion in secret by Celebrimbor and were his magnum opus, and he created them with one thing that the other rings did that their rings don't do, that these rings make you invisible. That is not true for these 3 rings of the elves, according to a letter of Tolkien, which is to Milton Waldman is the letter. I'm not sure, it's 153, 133, I'm very bad with numbers. But it's a letter from 1953, I think, to 1950s, to Milton Waldman's very famous letter. And interestingly, there Tolkien describes that the rings that were created under the observation of Sauron while he was as Anatar in Eregion, those rings made the wearers invisible and made them seen the unseen, as it's called, the basically race world, the unseen world in Tolkien's universe. There's a physical part of the world and an unseen part. And the 3 rings of Celebrimbor did not have this ability. Then Sauron creates the ring, and the Eregion people, the elves there, notice that, oh no, if we keep those rings and use them, all the 19 rings by then, the 9, the 3, and the 7, plus potentially even the lesser rings, we will be under the control of this master ring. so we have to take the rings off. And they had the strength to do this, they had not the strength to destroy the rings afterwards. So Sauron's plan failed there, and he was angry. And then he attacked Eregion, so that the elves would not have the rings, and take them away from them, in which he succeeded. And then he made a huge war on Eregion and so on. That is how the story in the books works. They make so much more sense there. There's, of course, different iterations of a lot of details in the story, who was where at what time. Especially Galadriel and Celeborn got moved around quite a bit. But Celebrimbor always was kind of part of Eregion. And in this context, when Sauron gets those rings back, he has, unfortunately, a confrontation with Numenor, which we might also see in the series, and has to escape. However, he did so much damage to the elves and all people living in this part of Middle Earth that he had a really good position, even though he got defeated. And now he had the rings. And what he now did was taking the rings and giving them to the dwarves and giving them to men. In this time, this must have happened because in their origin, all the rings of power were elven rings. They were supposed to be for the elves. There's one exception that is a hint that the dwarves believe that at the time the rings were created, as a gift, Celebrimbor gave one of the rings, the ring of Durin, to King Durin at the time in Khazad-dûm. It's not clear if that is true or not, but that is what the dwarves say. It's an interesting point that they do this, because due to this, they kind of say that the dwarves of the House of Durin were not later contacted by Sauron, and he gave them the ring. So basically they knew about Sauron and all the damage he did, they forgot about and say, yeah, well, there's this guy giving us a ring, well, we just trust him, forget what happened in the past. So it makes sense in a way that they got the ring from Celebrimbor, if they were honest. If not, then you could also spin the story around. I kind of like that Tolkien leaves this a little bit open and says, well, the dwarves believe this, if it's true or not, well, nobody knows. However, in the series, clearly it is depicted completely different than that. So what Sauron now does is waiting. Let just time pass a bit and people will forget, generations forget. Under men, he becomes a legend after 100 years. He has all the time in the world. And that's basically what he does there. And he gives the ring to 9 mortal men, which we don't know who they were. 3 were Numenorians. My suggestion is always, because we know that Sauron was never to Numenor before. It would make very little sense, in my opinion. So, to meet Numenorians, he has to meet them in Middle-earth, because the Numenorians expand and have settlements in Middle-earth. Lond Dyer is an example, but also they control the havens of Umbar. So this is relatively close to Mordor. Now, close is maybe a stretch, but closer than other regions, I would assume. And so maybe there he has contact with some of the Numenorian lords and gives them their ring. And even if they had potentially still goodwill and were faithful to the Numenorian goals, he promised them a ring that makes them more powerful. And this is kind of what, as I just read at the beginning, ages ago by now, here in the book. I have to find the thing here again. It will be always difficult, but basically, men proved easier to ensnare. Those who used the 9 rings became mighty in their day. So it worked. The rings definitely work. They enhance their abilities, even the ability to get invisible and see things unseen. Like, we can read how Frodo when he used the one ring and carried it around during the Lord of the Rings, that also Galadriel comments on that he understands things suddenly better than even some who would call themselves wise would. And he can see things that others don't see, like the ring Nenya on her hand. Sam couldn't see the ring, Frodo could see it. And he said that his eyes became keener through the ring and so on and so forth. So it definitely enhances some of your abilities, your perception, it makes you stronger. And even the dwarves report, though the dwarves are mostly almost immune to many effects of these rings, the dwarves also reported that the ring can also generate a lot of wealth, but it needs gold to breed gold. Some quotes like this also exist in the appendices. And as a result, those rings, you can definitely see that those magical rings definitely do their magic. They work. But Sauron potentially did never tell what the price is. And that is a very important point. And I said at the beginning, my worry and my critique, I'm not sure if it's critique here, the right point, it's just a teaser, we haven't seen anything. But my worry is a bit that they kind of fail to portray this devastating and terrible process of doing something good, getting a ring that makes you maybe more powerful and become, as we can read here, it's not clear if they become kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old, or if they were already kings, sorcerers, and warriors of old. They now just are better kings, better sorcerers, and better warriors of old with the rings. That's hard to tell. However, what is, I think, important here is that they become that they get these rings and then live their life. It's not like this process in the books we could assume will take centuries. We learn here, we have a sentence here from the book perspective that basically says that they got longer lives due to having the rings. They had, as it seemed, unending life, yet life became unendurable to them. To see that they had unending life, they must exceed their life span, basically, the limit. People have to notice, wait, this guy should be dead since 20 years. And he's still going on and looking like he's 20. Then you see they have kind of unending life. This process, they of course have to skip here. It's impossible to portray this in a show, for sure. However, they lived their life and did their things they had to do. Some were evil, maybe sorcerers, kings, and warriors. Some were good in their regard. But slowly, over time, they definitely, and the book here has a beautiful way or Tolkien a beautiful way of writing this, in my opinion. They could see things in worlds invisible to mortal men, but too often they beheld only the phantoms and delusions of Sauron. So Sauron had now the control, and slowly through his delusions and phantoms that they could send to them in their mind directly because they used the rings, and he had the master ring all the time. He could slowly bring them on their side, break their will, dominate them, and bring them to a point where they lose their complete will and being, and they become slaves, basically, to the One Ring, to his will. And from this point on, they are completely doomed and live in a state that's potentially worse than death. And I think I'm a bit worried that this terrible process, that they are not able to fully portray this in the show. We already see now these proto-Nazgul, the ring servants, Naznagol, or whatever they called it. Nazg, of course, means ring in black speech. Tolkien had very little words that showed us in black speech that we find in his notes. I tried to find the word for servant. I didn't look too deep into it, to be honest, but from just a very brief look into it, I could not find it, so I assume it might have been made up, but maybe there is a source for it. We will look into this at a later point. However, showing them already, as we can see it here in the screen, to come back to the scene with this very long explanation here by myself, we see that he already looks like a Nazgul. And my worry is that they now appear in the show at some point. Maybe this is very late in the episodes, I don't know. But they're already on his side, and they're already Nazgul. They're not doing the stuff they were doing. They were not doing what kings do, what sorcerers do, what warriors of old do. or their people potentially. But they are already the servants of the ring, just with a physical body. And the interesting part is that in this regard, this terrible process, not skipping this terrible process and not portraying it adequately, kind of gives you the impressions, yeah, there were some dudes, they were already loyal to Sauron, they just got the rings to become more powerful and become his most powerful servants. I think that takes the depth and the tragedy of what Sauron actually does to these people a bit short. I'm a bit worried as a Tolkien book fan that the show skips maybe a bit over this, but I might be wrong. We don't really see them. Maybe there was one screenshot where we saw potentially Camul, as I assume, and he seems to be like a knight or something like this, or a lord in a normal form, not wearing already a more Nazgul-like outfit. And in this regard, that would maybe work if they slowly work this through the season. I personally would have wished that those characters would have been established much earlier, so they have more screen time to kind of portray so many different characters. I'm not even sure if they will show us all 9 Nazgul and how they become into being, or 6 Nazgul, I would assume, because 3 are Numenorians, and I think the show will stick to that number, so that when Sauron potentially later has more to do with Numenor, then we might also see who gets the last 3 rings or something like that. I could imagine that the show does something like that. Who knows? However, there was now a very, very long explanation for how the rings work and why I think showing them already as some kind of proto-Nazgul is kind of maybe missing the point a little bit of how these rings work. I'm not sure if I could really portray my thought here adequately, but later I might do a more specific video on this or something like this, or we might also later have a live stream where we discuss this in more detail. But yeah, that was now a very long section in the video, but a lot of thoughts already on this when the first images dropped. There's another scene here. We see that Galadriel and Arondir, I think, have like an orc prisoner. And what I heard is they kind of befriend or something like this. We see later a scene where Arondir, I think, talks to an orc, which is rare. I kind of find the idea interesting in this regard because it makes an interesting topic that characters that are very different, or species that are in a way different species that are very different people that are enemies and have very different fates, so to say, that they kind of become friends or work together in a way that's sometimes an interesting topic. Tolkien, I guess, in this context, does not explore it when it comes to elf and orcs. Because, the nature of orcs is just too evil, too different for this to work. I mean, the idea is still there. We see it in the in the relationship between Gimli and Legolas, who at the beginning don't like each other, but especially in the films, but then start to grow in their friendship and so on. So it is a topic in Tolkien's universe. I'm not 100% sure if I think that's realistic, to be honest, that they take an orc as prisoner and they kind of become friends or something. I don't know. We will see what has to happen here. One has to think that, in a way, there is a recommendation that there is a certain, like, if an orc would ask for grace, it has to be granted to him. That is, it not always will, especially in times of war. There's a in the History of Middle-earth book, a very interesting text. History of Middle-earth book, Morgoth's Ring. It's the 10th book of the History of Middle-earth books, and that's pretty interesting to read. I think it's in Laws and Customs if I remember correctly. I don't have my copyright here, so I can't. Potentially will also take ages to find. But so there is a certain respect that should be granted to other creatures, at least by the standards of the wise among the elves. If that is always the case, it's difficult though, especially in this time. The Second Age is a difficult time for the elves, because due to the massive war among Sauron and the elves and the destruction of Eregion and bringing them basically basically almost to the defeat of the elves, it's hard to imagine that this might happen in these specific times. But if this is a topic they want to explore, they can go for it, even though I think realistic, it's not fully realistic. Here we see the so-called fell beasts. Tolkien describes these as winged steeds or fell beasts. They have no name, we don't know how they sound. We have the screeching sound of the Nazgul, which is already a bit strange, to be honest. Like the screeching stuff. I mean, it's classic, it's Nazgul or proto-Nazgul. But it feels always a bit supernatural in a way. And I find we already talked about the Nazgul quite a bit, and what I think there might be a trap there, or there's a worry simply about how they portray them. And this here goes, well, it's basically, we need Nazgul. We know they are not technically Nazgul yet because they were not transformed into race yet, which is a slow process and is basically the end after their life is basically over and they're under the will of the One. At some point they become phantoms. They stay invisible forever. But as I said, it's a slow process. So having thanks for the hint. Camera's just crashing here. So in this regard, the winged steeds is already, I don't know, a step. Yeah, it's kind of possible, but it feels for me a bit too far. I don't know. This is, in my opinion, a bit too much of, we need these Lord of the Rings vibes, a bit too much fan service. I would find it cooler if the winged steed and the Nazgul is a thing for later. We don't know much about the Nazgul in the Second Age. We know they appear. We can see it in Appendix B. I think it's the year 2251, as said, when they first appear. What they do in this time, we don't know, as Tolkien didn't write anything really, as far as I'm aware of, about this particular time and the Nazgul. We only hear about them in the Third Age, where they become more prominent. And maybe it's a dragon, and I misinterpret it, but showing at night a winged steed hearing the Nazgul sound in the background, well, that's potentially what they are going for. Like I said, the term fell beast or winged steed are just descriptions of them. What the creatures actually called, if they had any name, we don't know. There's no official name for them. Here we have the Dark Wizard. There are some rumors about who he might be. That's one of my bigger problems with it. We have like an evil Dark Wizard, which is, I think, kind of okay. I would find it interesting if this character is not one of the Istar, and it's not an Istar, and is actually just a man who learned by any means, maybe even if he learned it from the Blue Wizards or whatever, how sorcery works. And he's just a sorcerer, but he's still a mortal man. And he becomes a Witch King or something like this. I would say, that's a cool idea to do it. The idea that one of the Istari became also, I don't know, an ally of Sauron. It can work because Tolkien actually wrote this, that for example, there's a letter. I forgot which number it is, to be honest. I'm really bad with numbers. In most versions Tolkien wrote of them, they fail. And in one version, as an answer, he writes something like, maybe they founded magical cults or secret cults somewhere in the East. Who knows? So, in a way, it's not too unusual that we have an Istar here being a dark wizard and potentially being even more on the side of Sauron and fail in their task. There are not that many Istari left that he could be. We have Gandalf is already, well, he's a good one, so it doesn't work. Radagast also too good, doesn't work. Saruman, some say, could he be Saruman? No. Saruman also, his corruption comes in the Third Age, it's not here yet, and so on. So the blue wizards are left. It seems like they have some rights to use this term, I heard. I'm not sure if it is. So that makes, if he's one of the Istar, either he's somebody completely new of this order that they made up, or it is one of the blue wizards, I assume. Usually the blue wizards are two, and they are friends, according to some stuff we find here in Unfinished Tales. There's also one version, that is one of the last versions Tolkien wrote about them, we find in Peoples of Middle-earth. That's the 12th book of the History of Middle-earth series. And there's a small note just, it says they are successful in what they do. There they won't become evil, so to say, or leave their task behind. But in all other versions they fail, so in a way you could argue, well, if they just go with this version here, they definitely fail. However, there's another problem we have with the Istari. In all the versions where they fail, the Istari come all in the Third Age. Only in the Peoples of Middle-earth version, where they are successful, they already arrive in the Second Age, around the time the One Ring is created, or roundabout when Barad-dûr started to being built, Second Age 1200. Together with Glorfindel, by the way, who also, according to this version, comes to Middle-earth in this time. In general, though, the Istari are a topic of the Third Age. If you want to do a Second Age show, it's kind of strange that you show them here. But yeah, who knows? Then, I'm not a hugest fan of that. I kind of think, though, technically, if this is one of the blue wizards and he failed, it works. What is with his friend, though? Like, there are different names for them. Palando and Alatar is one name. Then in the last version, they are called Romestamo and Morinechtar, which means East Helper and Darkness Slayer in this version. There's also a name that is published in Nature of Middle-earth. There are two Istari, or Proto-Istari, mentioned. There they have, what are they called? Alikendo and what's the other name? I had to look it up, but it only appears there, and it's not clear if it's the blue wizards, but you could think they are. Still, yeah, they're looking for Sauron. That also kind of is fitting. It seems like he's looking for Sauron. That's his task. But it's also the task of the Istari is definitely that they were there to start a resistance against Sauron. That is also their main task. However, when Sauron was defeated at the end of the Second Age, we know the Battle of the Last Alliance. We see it in the prologue of the Lord of the Rings films, for example. Then the spirit of Sauron flees into the east, and according to the last version Tolkien wrote in Peoples of Middle-earth, they search him, but they fail to find him, because they of course want to finish him off. And they fail in that task, but they're successful in the task to bring dissension and disarray, as Tolkien writes it, into the far east, and make that the forces of the east don't outnumber the forces of the west, because all the Easterlings there, they could outnumber the forces of Aragorn and his friends easily, and to avoid that this happens, they must have success, so Tolkien thought. But yeah, I don't know. The story between Gandalf and the Dark Wizard is not yet completed, so I would assume, or it's not a big surprise that we see more of him. But I'm not a hugest fan of this idea. I mean, that he is there is, I think, my smallest problem. My biggest problem is that Gandalf and Tom Bombadil are there. Because of both, we know they never went to the east, especially not as Gandalf. You could argue Olorin might have went there at some point, but he clearly is Gandalf and not Olorin here. So, and he's one of the Istari already. So that also makes it difficult for the Olorin idea. That is his name on the West continent, where he's a Maiar and not a diminished hybrid kind of somebody who disguises himself as an old man, though he's a powerful angel-like being actually. However, here we see something is already attacked. Not sure what this here might be. Sauron, of course, is bringing war to the world, so that is possible. It is on a hill, and we have a lot of forest here. This shot kind of reminds me a bit of Mirkwood. If this is Mirkwood, then this, and that might be interesting actually. Then this place here could be what later is known as Dol Guldur. And this hill is then, as it's called earlier, Amon Lang. I don't really know, but that was kind of my first impression seeing this scene. Could be wrong here. Might look later into it. We know that Thranduil, or his father, in some versions, the father is Orofer. They at some point lived in this region, then they got kind of pushed back and had to hide. The whole occupation of Mirkwood, though, is technically also a topic for much later, if I'm completely honest, but who knows. It could also be something different. Maybe I'm not recognizing this place. We will see. Here we have a scene. There was some leakage already about it, that one of the Proto-Nazgul grabs somebody and brings him and drags him with him. For a moment I thought this might be Elrond or something, but I'm not sure. Interesting, here we see, I would assume, another fell beast. This might be in Mordor or something. In the book, the fell beast had like beaks, but in the Peter Jackson adaptation, they looked like dragon-like creatures and so on. But I don't know. Don't worry too much about a detail like this. They often show that they want to kind of connect a little bit with what Peter Jackson did in his films. It's difficult to get out of this portrayal because the films are so loved by so many people and so well known that going kind of against it design-wise always feels a bit strange in a way. But yeah. Here we have then Numenor, I would assume. Might be a new location. We know that in theory we still have to see Anarion, that is the brother of Isildur. Elendil had 2 sons, no daughter as far as we know. And yeah, one is Isildur, that we know also from the films, and also a brother Anarion. And he was already teased a few times. We might see him here. This is maybe another location in Numenor where maybe he lives. Who knows? Pharazôn also meets, interesting detail here, that Pharazôn meets with Gil-galad. That's, of course, I think this might be here our friend, what was his name, Belzaga or something like this. That's kind of interesting in this regard, that indeed Gil-galad had a lot of foresight in the books, and very early on in the timeline, at the very beginning of the of the second age, he already sent a letter to Numenor and said there is a shadow in the east. Sauron is getting stronger. We have to be prepared. We need to ally. And this happened very early on. And the show struggles, in my opinion, a lot to kind of connect this idea. It seems we now see it here again, but I feel like everything they built up in Numenor so far kind of feels a bit like that Numenor is very isolated and has no interest to work together with elves or anybody from Middle-earth. They do their own thing, they have their very huge own ambitions. And now it seems like Gil-galad visits Numenor to discuss things with Pharazôn, which makes sense if you know what happens in the timeline of the Second Age, but it makes very little sense at this point. I can guarantee you that Gil-galad and Pharazôn have not met in Numenor. That's very unlikely. Maybe they met on Middle-earth at some point. There's a possibility for that, I guess, but I don't know. Not really documented as far as I'm concerned. And the person that Gil-galad writes a letter to is also not Pharazôn. It's I think it's Tar-Mineldur, if I remember correctly. Would be the father of Aldarion, right? However, there needs to be a connection, and they have to, like I said, compress the timeline a lot. And yeah, the order also of things that happen here is really, really messed up. It's messed up quite a bit. So I think that this indicates that he will get the trust of Pharazôn, and Pharazôn thinks about it and sends potentially help to Numenor. And there will be a confrontation about a Numenorian army. And Sauron, I could also imagine, like in the book, it's a lot stretched out, everything. And in the book, you have a confrontation. At the time Eregion is attacked, after it's destroyed, at some point Numenor comes and helps. Like I said, Sauron comes to take the rings from Eregion in the books. That's different in the series. And he succeeds with this, destroys Eregion, and then he continues to conquer Middle-earth from there because he has a massive army at this point. And then only Numenor can save the day at the end, and because the late Numenorian fleets arrive in Middle-earth and then can surprise attack Sauron, and he loses a lot. And basically only he and his bodyguards escape at the very end. And his armies are completely wiped. And even though that's a massive loss for Sauron, he's still in a good position, as mentioned earlier. And then, much later, under Pharazôn, the Numenorians come back to Middle-earth again to challenge Sauron due to other circumstances. I could assume that the showrunners, because they have so little time, might fuse those two things together. So they Pharazôn sends his armies to Middle-earth. They help in the still going war with Sauron, potentially defeat him and then challenge him, and then the final hour of the Second Age is basically started. To not spoil too much here. But yeah, I think that this meeting is kind of interesting and goes potentially into exactly this direction. I still don't fully understand. Maybe I don't see it. We see Galadriel riding here in this scene, and somebody's following here. But I don't know who this is. Is this one of the Nazgûl, as in their physical form, chasing Galadriel or something? A meeting between those two, or is this a character we have already seen? I've forgotten. Adar is already gone. At least he's in black. Black is usually the color of the Nazgûl, so classic color coding makes this guy, I don't know, one of the baddies or potential baddies. Here it seems like Galadriel is also exploring some dungeons. I'm not sure where exactly. And we have heard about this a lot already. And interestingly, there is Celeborn, we ask ourselves, where is he? In the books, he's all the time there. He is not lost. And he is also an Eregion, which is interesting that in the show depicts this completely different. I don't fully understand why yet. We will see it through the seasons, I guess. But what is interesting is that he shows up in the show, and finally Galadriel has her loved one back. Still one problem with all of this, which I'm not sure how much they will go into this direction. So for people who don't have seen Lord of the Rings and don't fully understand the family relationships here, Elrond is a son-in-law of Galadriel. Galadriel is the mother-in-law of Elrond. Arwen is the child of Elrond and Galadriel's daughter, Celebrian, which we haven't seen yet. It would be so weird if, I'm not sure if Celebrian already exists or not in the universe of the show, or if they will show them at all. But it would be weird if she's born and good old Elrond, who is already quite there for some time, marries her later or whatever, or falls in love with her. Yeah, granddaughter was the word I'm looking for. Arwen's the granddaughter of Galadriel. So that would be kind of weird, in my opinion, because in the book, Elrond is only 350 years roundabout younger than Celebrian, older than Celebrian. For Elven standards, that not that much, and I think he only meets her and falls in love with her much later when she's far over almost 2,000, no, not 2,000, 1,200, 300 years, 400 years, yeah, 1,400 years, I think, if I calculated correctly. So they have both lived for quite some time already. That works a bit better in the books timeline-wise, and they only marry in the Third Age anyway, so when both are far over 3,000 years old, well, something like that. In this regard, that we see the husband of Galadriel, Celeborn, now here in the show. Good that we finally see him and all the mystery is kind of resolved. I have no idea. Like, that's also a worry of mine. I can't imagine that, seeing how the show for the first 2 seasons has worked, and I've often criticized the writing of the show, and I often criticize the structure of the show, and I often think it's not very elegant in how it tells certain things. My worry is a bit that the writers have to come up with an explanation where Celeborn was all the time. And I have a bad feeling that they come up with a really stupid explanation, so be prepared for that. Okay, we see an army here. Okay, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure where he yet is. Do you think this is still Numenor, or are they on Middle-earth yet? Because I can't fully recognize the character standing here. This is clearly Elendil. Maybe this is Anarion? Or is this Elrond? And they are, I don't know. There are 2 explanations. Like, it doesn't fully look like Numenor, if I'm honest. It looks more like Middle-earth. If that is the case, then maybe this is the army that Numenor sends to help out the elves. And maybe also our friend Elendil has to fight a little bit for it, and of course he's an elf friend. And as a result, he wants to help and maybe leads an army or something. Has to maybe... It's hard to tell how they resolve all the stuff there, but 2 explanations for it. I have to admit, though, the army here looks very mixed. It looks, from my perspective, but maybe I'm wrong. There's also the blue banners everywhere. So, I don't know. We will see. Oh, this is another interesting scene. It seems like we have Durin and his wife Disa, and we see 2 children here, which we have seen before. So there will be a 5-year time skip, And according to some panel information, I think it seems they are teenagers now. So they might now appear in the show as teenagers, which is kind of interesting, I think. So we have here potentially the two daughters or the two children of Durin and Disa here at this point. What they are doing, we see the mountains, potentially misty mountains in the background. Not sure where they're going, but yeah, it will be interesting to see what's going on in Khazad-dûm. The dwarven part, for the most part, worked quite well for me, with some exceptions. Season 2 was a bit weaker in this regard, and I think a lot of elements there made very little sense, but we will see. If you have Elrond, haven't heard and seen not much about him in this time. Here we have one of the Nazgûl. We can't see his face here. Around with the orcs. Not sure what's going on. And here's an interesting scene. We see potentially now King Durin. Yet again, Durin the Fourth versus Durin the Third. And two Nazgûl. Proto-Nazgûl or servants or whatever they are called. And what is interesting in this regard, that this meeting must have happened for real, not with Durin the Fourth, because usually between the Durin there are thousands of years. I still don't know why he is also Durin and his father is Durin, because Tolkien had several ideas for how the Durins work, but in the most common idea, especially that is written in the appendices of The Lord of the Rings, we know that a Durin is kind of a Durin reborn. There's also some weird reincarnation. The idea that a Durin possesses his old body again and becomes king again, something like that. But that's a weird version. But however, the version in The Lord of the Rings is that Durins are reborn. So it's always strange that we see another Durin here. The interesting thing though is that at some point, like from the book perspective, the Sauron, as said, attacked Eregion and got all his rings, except for the three. The three Celebrimbor was able to hide. One he gave to Galadriel, two to Gil-galad, or one to Gil-galad and one to Círdan. It's not 100% clear. And in this regard, at some point after all the Eregion story happened, and Eregion was destroyed, and he had to turn back, he waited for some time, and then, after nobody could remember what happened, and it was legends of old, he came back and gifted the rings to 6 or maybe 7 dwarf lords, and to 9 men doomed to die. As a result, the dwarves need to be contacted by Sauron in some form. Durin, according to Lord of the Rings and what the dwarf said, we had this also earlier, had basically there's a possibility that he already got his ring from Celebrimbor, which we also see in the show, but also there the Durin gets all the rings and he shares the rings with other dwarf lords. That's how it's portrayed in the show, and so the idea of giving the dwarves the rings to Sauron and a meeting between servants of Sauron and Durin so far is not really needed, especially when it comes to the House of Durin. It would be interesting if they search contact with other houses of Durin in this regard, but that's not what we see. Interestingly, we know that a dark figure contacted the dwarves in Erebor. I think it's also written, if I remember correctly, in the Lord of the Rings book. That is what Gimli says at the Council of Elrond. That's actually the reason why Gimli comes to Rivendell to report this. And so in a regard, it's kind of interesting that they show this. Not sure where they're going with this. It says there are no friends of Mordor here, so he has a strong stance here. Can't fully recognize who these two are. First I would have thought, is this Elendil? No, I think it's not. But we'll see. Then we have the Oliphant. Olifants are not in the east. Olifants are from the south. So the so-called Haradrim. And what is interesting in this context, that we see them here. So will we see Harat, or will they just be moved to the east or something? I have no idea. I would have wished that we would have already seen more of the far south, Harat and the Haradrim and so on, and especially Umbar. That might be an interesting place. They never showed it. I had so much hope for this place when they announced the show, that we might see a lot of Umbar. It would fit so well, and it's such an important point in this far-off land that we know so little about, and they never did anything with it. So maybe we get something to do with this. Looks a bit different than we know, but I mean, they are popular. They definitely existed, I guess, also in earlier times. Difficult to tell. It's Anarion, since he looks like Elendil. That's maybe a good point by chat. Here we have the scene that I mean. We have an orc talking to Galadriel and Arondi, and I heard that, I think it was in a panel or something, that they said there might be some friendship going on. We discussed this already earlier when I saw this one orc kind of captured. Maybe this is a different orc. I don't know. Not much to say here. This shot looks a bit fake. You know what I mean? It looks a bit too CGI. But I don't know. Definitely no, like the other stuff looked perfectly fine. This shot here looks a little bit, I don't know, like too much CGI stuff. Oh, that's another interesting little shot here. We see this here. It's also kind of a worry. You know this place. Maybe it looks rainy or cold, but the shape of these towers and so on give me distant vibes of Minas Morgul, which is of course the home of the Witch King in the late Third Age. But what is important to understand there, it is definitely not earlier. Like in the Second Age, it doesn't exist. There is later, at the end of the Second Age, after the Numenor storyline, Gondor and Arnor are found. And they built Minas Tirith, which is called Minas Anor at this time, the Tower of the Sun. Then, on the other side, close to Mordor, they also built another tower or city, which is called Minas Ithil. And very late in the Third Age, after the story of the War of Angmar and so on, Minas Ithil is conquered by the Witch King and taken for himself and becomes his realm, his place, and then is known as Minas Morgul, the city of, the Tower of Dark Sorcery, something like that. Minas Ithil means then Tower of the Moon, and Minas Anor, Tower of the Sun, and when Minas Ithil is gone, Minas Anor is renamed in Minas Tirith, which is Tower of the Watch, because now the Tower of the Sun watches over Minas Morgul, kind of. In the middle between both is Osgiliath, the old capital of Gondor, by the way, which we also see briefly in the Lord of the Rings film, but completely destroyed and ruined and deserted. Only Gondor and orcs fight over it. There we have him, Celebrimbor, I think. He makes kind of a good point, says the Dark Lord, we have to stop him, which is a good point by him. And we had all this Galadriel things going on in the past seasons, and often also weird decisions by the others. I don't know, was always a bit difficult. But we will see. I just hope that things that characters say make a little bit more sense in future seasons would be great. It's kind of interesting. I have to skip back a little bit. So we have the blue banners here back. We have Gelöt here to his next. So this is in Middle Earth. We have Parazon here. Interesting helmet design, which I find kind of cool. We know there is a illustration of the helmet of the Numenorian, of the Gondorian crown and kings, and it looks a bit like this. So that's actually an interesting design. Might have to look later a bit more into it. We know that the idea of the Gondorian crown is also from this Numenorian helmet. Kind of an interesting detail, I think. Tolkien also mentioned that something that the pharaohs in Egypt wore is kind of similar to that. Bit of fighting with Galadriel and orcs. We have here our potentially one of the Nazgul characters, I assume, if I hopefully recognize this correctly. Proto-Nazgul, we have the other two coming. Or is this Sauron already? Maybe this is Sauron. Very bad with sometimes recognizing actors, to be honest. But yeah, in the background. Here we have Círdan, it seems, who also plays often in the battles an important role. I guess maybe much later, but he's around all the time. And he has a beard again. So that's good. He shaved it off in season 2 when he appeared first. Liked his appearance. I liked how he looked, but should have kept on the beard. But that it's back. Of course, we have in the checklist of what to make fans happy. The great eagle shall not miss. That's an interesting scene with a white horse. I assume it's Galadriel. It would be cool if it's Glorfindel, to be honest, on his white horse. That would be nice. Yeah, Nazgul scenes, several. We talked already about this. They have winged steeds. They have horses. And here we have the creation of the One Ring, I assume. The creation of the One Ring, always a little bit problematic, because the creation of the One Ring should have happened already, because that's the whole point of Sauron's plot in Eregion. His point is, I teach them how to make these rings of power, but then, in secret, I betray them. I create a master ring when they have these rings and think, oh, we are now so powerful and we can now reduce the decay of the world and live longer in Middle-earth and whatnot. But then, in secret, he makes this ring and will enslave their wills. But unfortunately, or lucky for the elves, Sauron underestimated them, and they were still powerful enough in their wills to take off these rings of powers from their fingers, and so they ruined his plan. It didn't work. I mean, Sauron also with his plan kind of grabbed for the stars in a way and wanted the most powerful beings to be under his will, which were the elves. Men would have been much easier to enslave, which he later does with the Nazgul. And also works fairly well, to be honest. But still, it's not the ideal servant. It's basically a second-class servant. He wanted Celebrimbor and the Gwaith-ir Mírdain lords and so on. Those he wanted on his side. But that was not what he was getting. So, what is now... And I think this is my biggest criticism for the show, that they changed the order where things are created and the purpose of why things were created. The whole point of the Rings of Power in this show is that they can be, or not the show, the books, is that those, or the person who has the One Ring controls them. it's kind of a backdoor. It's a secret. They didn't know that they could be controlled. But Sauron knew. That was his plan all along. In the show, it seems he stumbles into the situation kind of randomly and comes up with a weird plan and so on. But the One Ring seems not to be on his mind at all. And now the elves don't have the rings anymore anyway. So, I don't know. And now he forges a ring to get 9 mortal men as his servants. Like, that would have been possible easier, to be honest. Like, the 9 rings to mortal men was always a plan B for Sauron. It was not his main purpose. And as a result, it gets a bit watered down. And now the Nazgul also, or the 9 men, don't have a chance anyway, because when he gives them the ring in the books, he already has the One Ring and all the power he needs to do this. So this doesn't fully work, in my opinion, and ruins a bit the point of the ring itself. So why does he now create this ring? To bring the other under his control? Yeah, potentially. I mean, he must create it to generate the danger. On top of that, it will also happen in the show, when he has a One Ring, the 3 rings also can't be used anymore, because they have the same design as the other rings. They are a bit different. They don't make the wearer invisible, but they still have the same backdoor, the same basic design that Sauron taught them. And here also it feels like, I don't know, Sauron is a bit... It's not his full plan. He has not fully thought this out. Well, in the book, it seems like Sauron had this plan from the beginning for thousands of years. He did so many things to pull through. And then when it didn't work, he was really angry about this. And then he had a good plan B, though, with attacking Eregion, getting the rings back, giving them to others who might become his servants. He also gives them to the dwarves. And the dwarves are immune to this. They are just so stubborn that not even Sauron can dominate them. That's the reason why the dwarves can still wear those rings. And Sauron hates it every second of it. But he made those dwarves just more powerful and more greedy. And only their greed is their downfall due to Durin's Bane, then later in Khazad-dûm. But overall, he hates dwarves. So much I can already spoil. But of course, he has to create the ring to generate this threat. The problem is it would be much cooler if this moment, oh no, Sauron has a ring, we have to do something, that this decision has to be made by the characters. And now it won't be made, because we know those 9 who have the ring, one of the 9 rings, those will lose in the end. We know this already. If you have seen Lord of the Rings, spoiler, they will lose. They will become Nazgul. We know the dwarves, well, they get somewhat better away for quite some time, but at some point their greed makes them delve too deep, and then they wake up something, which we also already saw on the show, which is unfortunate. Sometimes it feels like the show wants to be a third age series, but they pitched the wrong age by accident or something like this, and now they have to bend every idea they had for it to work in the second age. Yeah, I don't know. Not the biggest fan. It's kind of cool that we see the creation of the One Ring, but I'm a bit worried that, oh no, I killed Celebrimbor, I have his hammer here, as we also seen here in this one scene. I don't know how to make rings, I need his help, oh no, who can I ask? And then he has to find some help or something. We have seen this idea already in Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, that Sauron needed help with creating the One Ring from Celebrimbor there. Like, that's a completely different story, but I always didn't like that, because then you make the creation of the ring and Sauron, you diminish him in a way. Sauron is very smart and he has all the knowledge. He is an entity that has lived since the existence of the universe. He is not some dude who just walks through the woods and comes up with a plan on random and has no idea what he's doing. He was taught by the Vala Aule, who's basically the god of smithing. He knows how to do stuff and create artifacts. He knows. He was the servant of Morgoth, the most Valar that was once called Melkor as Valar, was more powerful than all the other together, and he learned quite a few of his dark secrets and so on. So Sauron is a powerful and mighty entity, and it doesn't look like this all the time in this show, which is a bit unfortunate. So I don't know, and this ring is now the masterpiece of Sauron. This is his masterpiece. While the 3 rings were the masterpiece of Celebrimbor, his magnum opus, the one ring is the masterpiece of Sauron. That is what he worked for, brought so many sacrifices, had to endure in the books, in one version to be precise, the scorn of Galadriel, who always noticed, well, with this Anatar guy, something is wrong, I don't trust that guy. And he had to endure her scorn with outward patience, as Tolkien writes. And all of that, he had to diminish, or had to take this form. And we know from the book Nature of Middle-earth that he couldn't change the form because he had to stay in it to not make other distrust him, to not give any chance to failure to his plan. So much that when he wanted to recruit orcs somewhere, I don't know where it is exactly, but he wanted to recruit more orcs because in the background he needed to get armies. The orcs would laugh at him because they were not like he looked like an elf, or he looked too good. Like they would not fear him as they would fear the classic Sauron. And that we don't really see here, that for all of this he has worked and endured so much. He makes his magnum opus, and then at the end it feels in the show a little bit too random how he gets to this point. And I would not be surprised if the show kind of makes, okay, I need some secret knowledge, I need to ask somebody or something. I don't know. Not the hugest fan of that idea. I mean, this little thing here, I can kind of live with this, that he still has the hammer of Feanor, which he got whatever from Celebrimbor in Eregion. But yeah. I think here we see it. It's kind of, yes, I kind of like the idea though that it's Feanor's hammer, which was already a bit unrealistic to be honest, but maybe distantly possible, and that Celebrimbor had it and now Sauron has it and used it to kind of forge a new doom for Middle-earth. That is also something I'm a bit worried, that the range of what this here means is not fully there. Like what Sauron is not just forging a ring for himself to get more powerful or to control the other rings. He is with the creation of this, he determines and changes the course of what happens in the next, let's say, 5,000-6,000 years. He kind of, at this point, forges a doom for Middle-earth. And if this doom is not stopped at some point, spoiler in Lord of the Rings through Frodo and his endeavor, which at the end he fails, but he still succeeds due to powers outside. But without that, he would have continued until the end of time with what he was doing. And at some point he would have succeeded if no power from outside would have stopped him. And this is a very important point. And I'm also a bit worried that this comes a bit short, what this actually means. Sometimes, the difference between, you can make a cool scene, how cool it looks to create the ring. But I think it's important to kind of express what it means to make the ring, what it means for Middle-earth, what a powerful artifact that is, and what it will do. That is, my opinion, I think the most important and most also very worried, besides the Nazgul thing, that this goes a bit into the wrong direction and is not portrayed adequately. I found it already a bit unfortunate that we see a lot of time, quite a bit of time was at least spent in one episode, how the 3 rings were created. It could have been more in my opinion, but That's just me. Then the 7 rings were a bit skipped. They were even created almost off-screen. Suddenly they were there, and then there was this meeting with the other dwarf lords, and you could see the rings. It was just cut, and then you saw it. You saw the parts of the making process, to be fair, but it was relatively short. And then they gave a bit more time for the creation again of the 9 rings. So still, I hope that all of this kind of makes it a bit more clear what these rings are for, what the idea behind it, the tragedy behind it, and the consequences behind all of that. But yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents here. I think that's basically the last scene we see in the trailer. Starts at the 11th of November, as we can see here, 2026. Yeah, very curious. I have covered all the shows so far, and there was some additional information in the panel that I read somewhere in some live blog thing. Shoutouts to Emre for posting it. Let's just wait and see. I don't want to. There might be a summary somewhere and some information. I'm not too happy with some information regards a Balrog that Sauron potentially consults. I don't know if that's a good idea, to be honest. I have to look into this at some point, if that would make any sense. It makes sense from the perspective of the show, because they already showed us a Balrog, and he has to have some reason to be in the show all the time. From the book perspective, he is there deep under the earth, and at some point in the, I don't know, over 1,000 years, I think, in the Third Age, so long after the Second Age, the dwarves delve too deep in Khazad-dûm and wake him, and then the kingdom of Khazad-dûm falls. And according to some sources, it is then called Moria by the elves, Black Pit. In some, there's an indicator though that it was called Moria before, but whatever. It's complicated. Still, before that, the Balrog doesn't appear or does anything in the books, which makes a lot of sense. He does not want to be found. And the idea that Sauron contacts him, hard to tell, to be honest, if it was ever an intention by Tolkien, if it is possible. I don't think so, to be honest. And I think there's very little indication that this would have happened ever. And so I also hope that this rumor is simply, or this maybe a misunderstanding there. But to be fair, I would not be surprised the show already pulled a lot of weird stuff, which I'm not happy with. So in this regard, who knows what they might come up with. I will definitely cover the show in a way. I try to be to still be relatively open and give it at least a fair perspective and a fair chance. But as said earlier in other streams and so on, I'm also skeptical, and every time I watch a season, my excitement for the show, my anticipation is more and more diminished, I have to admit. Especially the last season had so much weird stuff in it already. Season 1 also was tough. We have now Gandalf in the show, which was, the second the Second Age was not a character I was expecting there. I can kind of live with it, but the structure of this show and the writing in many places, unfortunately, not that great. Though I still feel like that a lot of people working there are definitely interested in it and often bring in interesting details. And some in my community even say, shoutouts to Jack, that the coverage is the most fun about the show, that a lot of Tolkien nerds come together, analyze the trailers, watch the episodes, analyze those, discuss every possible detail, and have a good time together, even though the quality of the episodes might vary here and there. But yeah, who knows? I hope you found this in any shape or form interesting or helpful. It was a much longer video than I anticipated, but I know a lot about Lord of the Rings, and I hope it was somewhat watchable because I just recorded this in one go and live. So all I can say, thank you people for watching and potentially see you next time. In addition, shoutouts to all the supporters and a huge thank you to all the supporters of a Patreon, channel memberships, and all the kinds of way, Patreon, Ko-fi, Twitch subs, and so on. Thank you so much for your support, even though we were a bit low on Tolkien content here in the past months or this year already. Doing a lot on the games channel currently and streaming a lot for the German community. So, yeah, time is running fast and so on. But yeah, now with some news, it's always exciting to get some news. We had some other news recently with the Warhorse Studio Lord of the Rings game that was announced. That's kind of interesting as well. So when there are news, I will definitely pop up here again and also try to be more frequent again with more Tolkien content. Currently even working on a video in parallel that might come out pretty soon, I hope. And that's, I think, it. So again, thank you people for watching and goodbye. Okay. Are you still there? Was it okay? Sorry for not looking too much at chat. Ja, ich glaube, die Sektion, wo ich eine halbe Stunde über die Nazgul und ihre Ursprünge rede, war vielleicht ein bisschen lang, aber maybe the section where I talked like half an hour about the Nazgul and their origin was a bit long. I don't know. Now I need a break or something. Did I just, like, my recording is 1.5 hours or something? Oh boy. And this, I thought it will take 6 hours. Oh, you got beaten by the mic. What is your impression of the trailer, chat? I'm not sure if anybody's listening on the English stream there. We might now also start the English stream and talk a bit about the trailer and the impressions first. But of course, before I do this, I would like to edit this. I kind of find it funny that these are my first impressions and thoughts of the trailer. In my mind, maybe it takes half an hour or something. But yeah, we kind of shot the bird, as we say in German. Oh god. Why am I so broken? Good. I felt like I was relatively fast for my... I could have talked longer about this, to be honest. War das denn sprachlich okay, Chat? Bis auf, dass meine Kamera einmal abgestürzt ist. War das denn interessant, wenn man jetzt Herr der Ringe mag? Nein, war es recht kurz. Aber war gut, nur ein bisschen kurz. Oh boy. Nur trinken, ey. I have to drink something, chat. So, maybe I stop the English stream for now. Maybe turn it on later. The English Twitch stream, that is. Nobody's watching there anyway, so... You. Ich fühle mich, als müsste ich jetzt mal auch eine Weile die Schnauze halten. Serie. Warum müssen die in jede Adaption? Naja, sie haben ja alles reingepackt. Der Ballrock ist, jetzt haben wir nicht gesehen, aber er wird wahrscheinlich wieder vorkommen. Nazgul sind drin, Fellbeast sind drin, Elefant ist drin. Nameless Things werden wahrscheinlich drin sein irgendwann oder waren schon weiß nicht, war das so ein Nameless Thing? Keine Ahnung. Was haben die denn nicht reingepackt? Weißes Pferd ist drin. Papa, ja. Wir haben Trolle haben wir schon drin gehabt. Katapulte. Komisch aussehende Orks. Ork-Frauen, Ork-Babys. Alles schon drin gehabt. Tom Bombadil ist drin. Ents sind drin. Du musst folgende Frage stellen. Was haben die noch nicht reingepackt? Adler haben wir vergessen, die sind auch drin. Celebrian, ja, die ist nicht drin, das stimmt. Also, Chat. Footage. Ich glaube, Suppe haben wir bestimmt auch schon gesehen. Mit Supper gab's schon. Dup, 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 dup. Ob Duri eine Tochter namens Dorine hat. Und wie die Kinder heißen. Guck mal, da habe ich's doch gesagt. Das Eingrooven war richtig schwer am Anfang, habe ich richtig gemerkt. Ich glaube, später ging's, aber am Anfang habe ich schon ein bisschen Eingroove-Schwierigkeiten gehabt. Rechner ist hier gerade hart an der Kernschmelze. Falls der Stream gleich weg ist, dann ist einfach OBS abgestürzt. Ich muss leider die Szene kleiner machen. Ey. Ich kann das nur auf 1018. Sonst kriege ich das heute nicht mehr hochgeladen. Das wird sonst bei einer Stunde, das dauert viel zu lange. Ich kriege es auch nicht gerendert. Falsche Taste. Hört ihr überhaupt den Ton? Ich glaube schon. Meinte sich, war aber keine Absicht. Nee, hört, glaube ich, wieder ausgemacht. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, but we have to do it. Sorry for all the people who hate watching stuff about. Überlebe ich die Datei einfach direkt in Upload-Baller. Einfach ohne groß irgendwas zu editieren oder so. Lol, die ist nur 2,9 Gigabyte groß. Das ist ja ultra witzig. Das ist falsch. Das ist, was ich machen wollte. Ich wollte hier capturen, ne? Hm. Wir wissen Adobe. Wir machen jetzt gleich den Stream an. Auf Englisch. Dann ballern wir nochmal durch den Trailer durch. About Rings of Power, but well, I'm curious, and a lot of people are. So let's start with it. Play it with sound. Maybe shut up, and if it gets claimed, this part of the trailer will just be silent or something afterwards. I don't know how it will work. You will find out when you watch this live. Will ich mal raus, ist nicht so mein Thema. Aber das Gespräch vorhin, Chris, ja auch kein Thema und eine gute Nacht. Jo, dir auch, TJ, tut mir natürlich leid, aber heute ist auf jeden Fall der Ringetag. Da tut mir immer leid, wenn, natürlich interessiert das jetzt nicht jeden so super krass.
There are no friends of Mordor here.
Come with me.
The Dark Lord. We have to stop him.
Ja, eine coole Stimme, Celebrimbor. People are. So, let's.
Him.
Sieht auf jeden Fall nicht so amused aus danach, finde ich. Also, wo müssen die Leute hinspringen? Eigentlich render das jetzt gleich nochmal in 1080p raus. Dann sind wir hier bei 2 Minuten 51.
Now is the mighty hour come.
The Dark Lord is on the brink of crafting a new power. One ring to rule them all. He's got armies scouring Middle-earth.
Middle-earth will burn. Has it not yet occurred to you? Death might well be the price of saving it.
Trying to get back to you.
Genauso skeptisch wie Elrond, gefällt mir.
There are no friends of Mordor here.
Come with me.
The Dark Lord. We have to stop him.
The shadow rises to Middle-earth. How would you like to rise with it?
Stop. I think that's it. Well. Will you wear better wigs? We will see about that. So, few things noticeable, I guess, about that. Okay, wir sind hier bei wie viel? 3 Minuten 7. Meine Impression, meine Reaction ist jetzt nicht das allerbeste vom Ei, sag ich mal. Lesser Rings, 16 Rings of Power. Okay, kann ich schon mal ans Ende springen. But to be fair, the episodes might vary here and there. Here, the classic Sauron, and for the creation again of the knife with it, but yeah, time is running fast and so on, but yeah, now with some news, it's always exciting to get, I hope, and that's, I think, it. So again, thank you people for watching, and goodbye. And here in the past month, or this year already, doing a lot on the games, though I still feel like that a lot of people working there are definitely interested in it, and often bring show that the episodes or form interesting or helpful. It was a much longer video than I anticipated. From us every possible detail and have a good time together, even though story here and there. I found this in any shape or form interesting or helpful. It was a much longer video than I anticipated, but I know a lot about Lord of the Rings, and I hope it was somewhat watchable because I just recorded this in one go and live. So all I can say, thank you people for watching. It was somewhat watchable because I just recorded this in one go and live. So all I can say, thank you people. Thank you for watching. 4K. 4K ist sogar falsch. Auch das kleine. Thank you for watching. Machen wir hier den Background. Muss halt auch aufpassen, dass ich mich nicht selber zensiere. Das ist natürlich nicht ganz leicht. So komisch sieht. Aber hey. Because I just recorded this in one go and live. So all I can say, thank you people for watching, and potentially see you next time. In addition, Shoutouts to... So, haben wir den Shoutouts hier nochmal. Das müssen wir... Was war das letzte Video, was ich gemacht habe, Chat? Battlefield, Warhorse, San Andreas, Season. Ghost in the Shell, oder nicht? Twitch subs, and so on. Thank you so much for your support. Shoutouts to... In addition, shoutouts to all the... Shoutouts to all the supporters, and a huge thank you to all the supporters of the Patreon, channel memberships, and all the kinds of way, Patreon, Ko-fi, Twitch subs, and so on. Thank you so much for your support, even though we were a bit low on Tolkien content here in the past month or this year already. Doing a lot on the games channel currently and streaming a lot for the German community. So, yeah, time is running fast and so on. But, yeah, now with some news, it's always exciting to get some news. That's kind of interesting as well. So when there are news, I will definitely pop up here again and also try to be more frequent again with more Tolkien content. Currently even working on a video in parallel that might come out pretty soon, I hope. And that's, I think, it. So again, thank you people for watching and goodbye. That's, I think, it. So again, thank you people for watching and goodbye. Okay. Ja, das Video ist einfach 1,5 Stunden lang. Einfach mal 90 Minuten rausgehauen in 90, weiß ich nicht, 2 Stunden oder so. Das ist doch mal eine Zahl. So, Chat. Da habe ich jetzt alles erzählt. Ich werde jetzt nicht groß dran rumcutten oder so. Wenn ich irgendeine Stelle habe, wo ich mal schneiden hätte müssen. Ich glaube, ich habe das dafür, dass das 1,5 Stunden lang ist, habe ich das echt gut hingekriegt aus meiner Sicht. Die Content-Maschine. Ist halt nicht poliert, sag ich mal. Ist halt so ein Live-Ding. Ich weiß nicht, wie es ankommt. Natürlich weit unter meinen Standards für 1,5-stündige Videos. Aber, ja, keine Ahnung. Ich pack das mal in den Renderer und hoffe aufs Beste, Chat. Ihr kennt das ja. Kann nicht viel, aber aufs Beste hoffen, da bin ich ganz gut drin. Am Ende guckt halt eh keiner. Ist ja immer so. Also ich würde es gucken, wenn ich es nicht schon live erlebt hätte. Ja, okay, das ist natürlich richtig. Aber ich hoffe, dass es sich noch irgendwer anschaut. Und so. Kurz rendern. Ich weiß nicht, wie lange das dauert. Ich hoffe, es geht super schnell. Boah, angeblich rendert meine Maschine das in 8 Minuten runter, Leute. Was ist das für ein Tier, diese Maschine hier einfach? Einfach eine Maschine. Mal einmal Applaus für den Rechner hier.
Impressive.
7 Minuten 9 sind wir aktuell. Also, Chat. Der El Plano. Seht ihr nicht. Doch, seht ihr? Nee, jetzt seht ihr es. Könnt ihr es sehen? Also 7 Minuten, ihr seht es wahrscheinlich nicht. Ich will jetzt ja auch den Rechner nicht zum Absturz bringen. Ja, pass auf, Chat. Der Plan ist jetzt wie folgt. Ich mache jetzt so eine Pause. Ich würde euch ja Clips geben, aber ich brauche die Rechenleistung gerade für andere Dinge. Deswegen gebe ich euch nur Retro-Gedudel. Aber schon lange nicht mehr. Einfach mal klassisch, einfach ein Durchdudeln hier beim Retro-Gedudel. Ich werde mich auch mal kurz, einfach mich abfreshen. Mal kurz was was zu trinken holen. Und so mal kurz Gesicht abwaschen. Mit kaltem Wasser. Das ist mich wirklich warm. Hände waschen und sowas. Mal kurz frisch machen. Und dann denken wir über den Stream-Schedule nach und laden das hoch. Hochladen wird einen Moment dauern. Aber ja, bis gleich, Chat. Hallo. So Leute, da bin ich wieder. Brauchen wir echt lange, um das hochzuladen, Chat. Eine Stunde dafür, ey, das ist ja krass. Ich meine, ich streame auch noch nebenbei, das reduziert natürlich den Download-Speed ein kleines bisschen zumindest. Vielleicht kann ich den YouTube-Stream schließen. Es tut mir natürlich leid für die YouTube-Zuschauer. Dann kriegen wir vielleicht ein bisschen mehr Upload-Speed raus. Ich mache den Stream ganz aus erstmal und schedule den dann später für vielleicht keine schlechte Idee. Dann kann ich noch einen Moment mal hier in Ruhe essen und chillen. Und schedule ich einen Stream, wo wir noch mal kurz reingehen. Kurz ist ja, ihr wisst, in meinem Sprachgebrauch ein Wort mit vielen Bedeutungen, die sich auch gegenseitig widersprechen können. Dass ich auch ein Bettchen bin, ja, das passiert im Besten einfach, ne? Das ist so. Ich glaube, ich werde das erstmal den YouTube-Stream ausmachen, weil es passiert eh nichts. Ich werde den Stream schedulen. Wir streamen, wenn wir streamen gleich. Ich hoffe, dass es auch gleich wird. Streamen wir eh auf dem anderen Kanal weiter. Das wäre der youtube.com/The Philosopher's Games Kanal. Das ist der Herr der Ringe Kanal, der englische. Genau, machen derzeit mal entspannt das Divine Beast fertig. Das ist auf jeden Fall a thing. Poste das mal. Gucken, ob es klappt. Das klappt sogar. Ich poste das mal hier rein. Das ist der Kanal, wo es dann streng genommen /live, also hier, würde es weitergehen. Ich mache den Livestream dann da auf Englisch weiter. Das war jetzt irgendwie ein kurzes Vergnügen hier auf dem Kanal, aber ja, ich hätte eh den YouTube-Stream hier ausgemacht. Es tut mir, wie gesagt, immer leid für die Leute, die dann dazu gucken und so. Immer kompliziert bei mir mit den 1000 Kanälen. Es passiert aber erstmal nicht viel, bis ich das Video hochgeladen habe. Oder mal schauen. Je schneller ich das Video hochgeladen kriege, desto besser ist es für mich. Deswegen, ja, danke fürs Zuschauen an die YouTube-Zuschauer. Vielleicht mache ich jetzt auch Twitch aus, weiß ich noch nicht ganz genau. Bis später wahrscheinlich. Vielleicht, wenn es zu spät wird, dann bis morgen. Dann mache ich den Stream einfach morgen. Bin noch nicht ganz sicher, wie ich das machen soll. Die beiden Optionen bestehen, weil ich will nicht eigentlich zu spät schlafen gehen. Weil das momentan bin ich mit meinem Schlaf-Tag-Nacht-Rhythmus ganz zufrieden. Wir haben jetzt schon 11. Ne, das ist eine böse Zeit. Wenn ich jetzt 6 Stunden streame, dann haben wir ein Problem. Deswegen müssen wir aufpassen, wie wir das so einteilen. Aber ja, an YouTube-Zuschauer machen wir schon mal den Stream aus. Eventuell, ich schedule den eh, also sollte dann eine Benachrichtigung kommen oder so. Ihr werdet es finden. Bis